On this episode of Dead Last, things look a little bit differently because I have a little bit sparer setup here because behind me right now, off in the distance, the LA fires are going on. And I just don't really have as much time as I've had in the past to kind of get this all done. So forgive the little cleaner look for things. But I also wanted to do something different with this episode because in the past I've done where you guys sent me the movies you thought were scariest. But I thought, what if we did just the individual scenes that traumatized you? And those moments in a movie that don't even necessarily have to be horror films that really shook you to your core. And what I did was I actually asked you guys, all of YouTube, to send me just your list of the 10 scariest movies, scenes that you could think of from your youth or from present day or whenever that really just upset you or frightened you or whatever. Just things that scared the crap out of you. Just that one scene. And I thought it might be kind of interesting to see how many of them were movies that, weren't generally considered that scary, but then had that one moment. So what I did was I tallied them up, and we're going to take a look at the 15 scenes that got the most amount of votes here. But that's not all, because after I do that list, we'll have a few other things to talk about as well, too. So there were actually 8 different scenes that got 5 votes each. So each of these are equally spooky. So I'm going to rank them myself to determine their spot here. And at number 15, with 5 votes, I'm going to put the ending of Wreck or Record. But don't get me wrong. This is a great moment. This is a great scene, and the whole finale is fantastic. But honestly, I don't get personally affected by this one as much as the rest of the film. This whole freaking movie is intense. So I guess that the ending bit didn't stand out as being more traumatic to me personally. Like, I myself was more shocked by the body dropping from the stairs. I know that that's more of a jump scare, but that one really unnerved me. And it did get a couple of votes, but this ending bit beat it out. But what makes this one scary is the use of the night vision. Sure, it had been done in Silence of the Lambs, but here we're getting more of a horror take on it because not only can we barely see anything, but there's this thing there that we can't even comprehend. It brings this whole other layer of tension to the moment, and everything just builds until that big confrontation and that jarring final shot that they sadly spoiled with most of the marketing. Our number 14 moment, also with 5 votes, is one that I'm going to give the slight edge to over the Wreck scene. And it's one that really got me, and it's from It Follows. And it's the appearance of the tall man in the hallway. This is a good one because it's definitely a jump scare, but it's more than that. It's a great bit of timing and misdirection, a word I'm going to say a whole lot in this episode. This scene is scary because you know that the entity can look and sound like other people. So when you have Jay in a room, and we know that there's something outside that door, but then they throw enough question as to whether it's something normal or nefarious on the other side. But then they open that door and you get this quick sense of relief that it's their friend, and for a brief second, it feels like a fake out. But then that tall man just appears from behind her, and the way they shoot it is awesome because he just looks so, off. There's something not quite right about his face, and he's abnormally tall and just appears out of the darkness. There's a couple of other ones a little later on this list that do this with the notion of making you look one way, having you feel a sense of relief, and then having something appear from an area that you feel is safe, and this one nails that. Number 13 is exactly the reason why I came up with this list, and it's the type of stuff that I was hoping to see, because at 5 votes also, this is the Vera transformation from Superman 3. This one I think lands on here just based on age range. Superman 3 is a movie for everyone. It's a dumb movie with even silly kid-friendly pratfalls. It had Richard Pryor doing his most mainstream wholesome comedy possible. This wasn't something that horror fans were seeking out. It was a family film. All of us in our younger states were going to watch that and have a good old-fashioned fun time. I mean, even evil Superman is still kind of all ages since he was more of a prankster than a villain. So, by the time that they get to the ending, everything feels so low stakes. But then, the corporate baddie's sister is pulled into that machine, and there's this series of close-ups of circuitry being grafted onto her in agonizing detail. Like, they go out of their way to make it look really painful. And then she's transformed into this robot thing that looks unlike anything else in this entire series. It's a killer robot that wandered in from some other film and then goes on the attack. Like, sure, after this it goes right back into silly territory and stays there. But for that brief series of scenes, it was traumatic. This is also a scene that I don't think has that same impact now, and it was truly a product of the time it was released, but it clearly left a mark. Our number 12 scene is the opposite of that one in terms of tone, because our next 5 vote getter is from Pet Sematary, and it's, that one scene was Zelda. So, to break it down, in the movie, there's an evil influence in this haunted area around a pet cemetery that brings things back from the dead if they're buried there. When Lewis puts his son there, it unleashes whatever dark forces lurk. His wife, Rachel, comes home in the middle of all this and has to face a fear from her past. Seems her sister Zelda had spinal meningitis, and they basically locked her away in a room and let her waste away. But in the scene of note, she comes face to face with that memory, and we meet her sister, and we'll never forget it. This is different because Pet Sematary was trying to be scary, but in my opinion, it never really quite succeeded. It's not a bad movie, but I've always been underwhelmed by it. But this scene sticks in my head, and I think the thing that hits with it is that it's real. In this movie of supernatural chaos and zombies and ghosts, the scariest thing is a human being, sick and dying. It's terrifying because it's a thing that we could possibly encounter ourselves, and a lot of us have that memory of a sick family member that we just couldn't bear to see for whatever reason. Not as extreme in this instance, but it's not uncommon. So, out of everything here, this is clearly that moment that stands out because we can relate to it. And it doesn't hurt that the makeup is so effective and that Andrew Hubestek just nailed that performance.
Never get out of bed again! Never get out of bed again!
Coming in at number 11, also with 5 votes. This one is from a movie that got a lot of mentions because it's The Shining, but the scene that got called out the most is the infamous 237 bit. So, of course, it was actually 217 in the book, but Kubrick made it 237, and I'm sure that there's someone out there who has ways of showing how that was Stanley's secret way of revealing the truth about D-Day or something. But in a movie full of creepy moments, this is the one that stands above all the rest. And it's an early version of an ages-old trope. So Jack is investigating his son's claims that a woman in a room attacked and hit him, so he enters the room, only to find a very sexy naked woman in the bathroom. She seduces him, and it seems like a win-win for Jack, but he looks in the mirror and sees that this is no sexy lady at all. It's a rotting corpse of a naked old woman. And that trope I mentioned is the naked old person trope, which may or may not be trademarked by A24 by this point, but horror has had a long-running notion that if you get past the age of 60 and you have your clothes off, you're terrifying. And in this scene, it's not just that. It's the idea that this was a beautiful lady 1 minute ago, and it's not just the nudity, it's also the rot. And also the way that the woman is cackling and reaching for him. And hell, yeah, this whole thing is pretty horrifying. It's not my personal scariest moment from this film, but it's always affected me. But then so does this whole movie. I've mentioned before that The Shining is one of my all-time favorite horror flicks, and it doesn't disappoint with unnerving moments, and this one seals that deal. Here we go into the top 10 now, and this next one is kind of like that Superman 3 moment because it's another with 5 votes. But it's going to Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and that's right, it's Large Marge. For some reason, I expected this to be on here, and it's different than the whole Vera thing in a number of ways. First off, I'll explain the scene. Pee-wee is on a quest to find his stolen bike, a trail that leads him to the Alamo, but then to Hollywood. And along the way, he has to hitchhike a ride with a trucker. That trucker is an older woman who begins to tell him a story about a fateful night and a horrible car wreck that left the driver horribly mangled. While telling the story, she momentarily transforms into some sort of creature. It's not really a person who is injured in a car wreck, and more of a cartoon character, but it's completely out of the blue, and it's terrifying. Now, unlike Soups, this movie is not all around goofy and cornball, with one moment of terror shoehorned in there. No, the entirety of this film, which is a comedy, has this dark, quirky vibe to it. This isn't even the only moment from this film to make the list, because there was a couple of mentions of Pee-wee's Clown Dream listed as well. But this is the moment that sticks with people, and it's because it's a perfectly crafted jump scare without even really being a scare. It's a punchline. It's the capper to the story, and the moment, plus a subversion of the old hitchhiker trope from Urban Legend. In that old tale, it's the car that picks up the hitchhiker, and it's them that is later revealed to be an apparition. But here, it's the driver instead. And plus, you're watching a movie about Pee-wee freaking Herman. Why on hell would you expect this wacky creature popping up in your face? It's perfect.
Be sure and tell them Large Marge sent ya.
Let's look at our number 9 now, and we're still talking about moments that got 5 nods. And this one is an all-time classic, and it's from the original '74 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's that door slam. This is the exact opposite of several scenes on here. Several of these are about shocking moments in an otherwise calm situation. This is not that at all. Every single frame, every single scene of this movie is just dripping with dread and this ominous feeling that something's not right. You have your 5 young folk on their trip, and they head up to one of their old houses in the middle of nowhere, and along the way, they encounter weirdness at a cemetery and then a disturbing hitchhiker. And the tension just keeps mounting and mounting. You spend every single second waiting for the shoe to drop and things to go bad because you know that it's coming. And then it does come. Kirk and Pam go wandering off on their own and find another old house nearby and wander in, and Kirk comes face to face with what we've all been waiting for. He stumbles and looks up, and we get our first look at Leatherface towering above him, and he clubs him to death with one hit. But that's not all, because if it were, this probably wouldn't be on this list, or at least not this high. Instead, after being struck, Kirk's body flails around on the ground, having some sort of seizure. And then the hulking Bubba grabs the sides of the metal door and just slams it shut. It's that silence right afterwards that makes this one so high for me. The shot lingers on the closed door for just long enough for us to soak in the aftermath of the chaos that we just witnessed, and it's this temporary reprieve before all of the madness that follows. Okay, number 8 is the last of the scenes that received 5 votes, and it's my top rated of them. And of course, I'm going to put it higher because it's from my favorite movie, Jaws, and is the scene with Ben Gardner's head. After local policeman Brody meets up with marine biologist Hooper, they both decide to head out onto the water to see if they still have a shark problem. Hoops goes underwater, investigating the abandoned boat of Gardner, and there's a hole in the side of the hull. As he sidles up to it, lo and behold, Ben's mangled head pops up and scares the crap out of Hooper and us. And this scene is notorious for several reasons. First up, some people don't know who this guy is, but it's Ben Gardner. This guy, the little fella guy. The last we saw him, he was out on a boat with another guy, angry at all the amateur fishermen out there, but then we don't see him again until we see his corpse. This guy, the dude in the boat with him, is never seen again, so he's presumably dead. And I'm not sure how Ben was killed because he's still in the boat, but regardless, he's dead. But this scene almost wasn't as scary as it turned out to be. They originally shot this where they shot the rest of the film, in a big underwater tank. But it just didn't work. The timing was off. So Spielberg opted to reshoot it, but they didn't really have the money to do it, so they just shot it in editor Verna Fields' backyard swimming pool. To be clear, it's just this shot that was redone. Some people think this whole sequence was a reshoot, including them in the boat topside, but it's literally just this shot. And thank Bruce that they did it, because the timing is perfect, and that moment is such a good fright. Moving down to number 7 now, and this one is our film scene that showed up on 6 different lists, and I'll tell you right now that it's from John Carpenter's classic, The Thing, but what scene is it? It could literally be a dozen. Well, it's the blood test, of course, and I made a quick mention earlier, but now I'm going to explain what I think makes a great jump scare, and that is misdirection. But here's what I'm going on with this bit. An alien creature has infiltrated an Antarctic research facility, and here's a tidbit. McCready calls it Outpost 31, which is what everyone calls it in the fandom, but the sign outside calls it the National Science Institute Station 4. But this being has the ability to devour and replicate any of the life forms that it encounters, and it can look like anyone. But McCready has a plan. He theorizes that each part of the thing is alive and operates on its own and will react to pain. His plan is to collect everyone's blood and do a blood test to reveal who is human and who is not. They tie everyone down and draw the red stuff and burn it with a hot needle, and if it reacts, then that person is a thing. But then things get wild when it does react, and that moment is a great shock and surprise because of misdirection. You see, they have a few characters tied up together there, and the film has done a great job so far with leading you to your most likely culprit. We have Childs, Palmer, and Gary left there, and the movie has done a lot to lead you to suspect Childs and Gary. In fact, Mac thinks Gary is the most clear option and tells him as such right as he's about to test Palmer's sample. By this point, you're not suspecting Palmer. You're thinking it's one of the other 2 guys on the couch. Throw in the fact that the movie gives you a static shot of Mac's hand holding that sample earlier to establish that it's a normal thing and not an FX gag. So when that blood pops up, you're not expecting it at all. It's a great bit, and it's one of those moments where you'll want to watch with a friend, and during this part, sneak a peek at their reaction, because it's gonna be big. Okay, with this next one, I had to make a judgment call because there was a few lists that were unclear which way they were talking about, but with 7 votes, our number 6 scene is Samara coming out of the TV at the ending of The Ring. Although it's possible that it could be Sadako and Ringo as well. Some of the lists just said the ending of The Ring, so I guess it's debatable which one that they were talking about, so I'll discuss them as if they were the same thing, because they're essentially work the same way. Both versions of The Ring do the same trick. They give you this big finale to the film with the body in the well, and the story allows you to think that that's the whole point. This little girl just wanted her body to be found and her soul to be set free. And they make it seem like the movie is over and all is well. But then that rug is just pulled out from under us when it turns out that she's very much still in action. Just as our leading guy is chilling at home, getting ready to relax, the TV turns on, and we finally see what happened to all those other victims as Samara or Sadako approaches the screen and then just crawls out of it. Again, it's all down to misdirection, as the movie has let us put our guard down and makes us think that it's all tied up in a neat bow. But then that scare happens. A funny story is that I remember renting Ringu way back when, before The Ring came out, and thinking, this is pretty good, but is it really all that scary? But then that final scene happened, and it practically climbed up my wall, because it's a good one. All right, number 5 now, and this is one of my personal favorites, and it got one more vote than Girls Coming Through TVs because with 8 nods, we're looking at the hallway scene from The Exorcist 3. And this is the perfect jump scare. It's perfect. Let me explain. The third Exorcist film is about a number of killings that emulate the style of a previous serial murderer, and everything seems to point to this one hospital. Our scene happens late one night as the on-duty nurse is there and they're on high alert because of what's been going on. After a fake-out scare where she goes into a room, we get this masterful, unbroken shot where she walks from room to room to check out a sound she's heard. And this works so well because it's all one shot. And we see her walk around, and there's no score to manipulate us. It's just the tension of what's happening. She gets up and goes into a room alone, and just as she does, in the background, the on-duty security guard gets up and leaves. Right after, the nurse comes out of this room, and there's some of that good old-fashioned misdirection. She's in that room, and we were maybe expecting something spooky to happen in there to her after that guy left, but here she is just walking out, and everything seems fine. We breathe a sigh of relief as she turns out the light, and we even see her lock the door, so our mind is now at ease. That room is safe. But then, right after she walks away, from the room that she was just in with no issues, a white figure emerges behind her for the kill as the camera rushes in closer to the action. It's just so well orchestrated and perfect. I'll say it again, misdirection. Let's do our number 4 scene now, and this is another one of my top faves, and it was on my roster, and the last one was as well. And with 9 votes, it's another bit from Jaws. It's the opening scene with Chrissy. And this moment does so much. It sets the pace for the film and shows us the stakes, and lets us know what we're in for. It's a great build-up because we have this little party on the beach and young Chrissy meeting up with a handsome fella, and they run off together, and he says, "Where are we going?" And she says, "Swimming." And thanks to MOD, the next thing I hear is, "Swimming, let's surf." But that's another story. But they're not just swimming, they're skinny dipping. But her poor man-meat doesn't even make it to the water and passes out. But Chrissy is still game to swim around in the nude at night in the ocean. But there's nothing to worry about because shark attacks in those waters are extremely rare. Or are they? And what makes it wilder is that she's naked. She's completely out of her element, alone, and totally vulnerable. And then we get those shots. And let me introduce you to the concept of thalassophobia, which is the fear of deep bodies of water and what may be lurking beneath them. And this scene may have triggered it in an entire generation. I mean, definitely me. But you know what does it for me? The amazing acting of Susan Backliny. When she first gets yanked and she does that little panicked series of breaths, it feels so real and seems like genuine panic. And then watching her get yanked under the water, screaming out, it feels like it goes on forever. And by the time that she's taken underwater, you're almost relieved that her ordeal is over. Great stuff. Top 3 time, and this next one is a real spine chiller and managed to get onto 10 lists, and this is the ending of the Blair Witch Project. Josh against the wall. Early in the movie, we get this story about how the Blair Witch would take over a guy named Rustin Parr, and he killed a number of children, but made one stand in the corner staring at a wall while he killed the others. So, when Heather, Josh, and Mike head off into the woods to make a film about the legend, you know that things are going to go bad. And they do. As they're lost in the middle of nowhere, on their final night, a mysterious house appears out of nowhere. Josh had already disappeared, and they go in looking for him, and we're seeing everything through the lens of Heather, as she's the one holding the camera. As she runs through the hallway, she eventually lands on Mike, standing in the corner, staring at the wall, and something unseen claims her. Now, love it or hate it, you have to admit that this scene absolutely rocks. And I think that the reason it sticks so strong in our head is because of the way it's shot. And the movie has done a good job with creating that aspect of reality. And let me tell you, I saw this movie in the theaters on opening night. And even if you don't think it works as a movie, you have to say that it feels pretty real. So when we get to that shot of Mike standing there, and keep in mind, the scares of this film are more subtle and less supernatural, with most of them happening just out of camera range. So here you have something happening right in front of us, and it's low-key and subtle, but holy crap, is it haunting. It was a close race for all of these, with only one vote in between each of these entries, and our second place beats Blair Witch by 1 vote, and was also beat out by 1 vote. And with 11 lists, our number 2 entry is another from The Thing, and it's the big one, the defibrillator scene. I told you the setup for the movie earlier, and this is the film's biggest wow moment. There's this bit where there's a whole bunch of chaos happening as tensions have hit their peaks, and the entire gang is at each other's throats. Mac shoots Clark, and one of their crew, Norris, collapses. Now, there's been a bunch of discussion of this scene and people saying that this is where Norris is taken over, but the most likely thing is that the Thing, which duplicates its prey exactly, also duplicated his weak heart. The creature was not expecting this. And then, when Doc Copper is about to hit him with the defibrillators, its chest bursts open and chows down onto Doc's arms, killing him. Up until this point, we've seen the Thing mutate a dog to a pretty wild point, and we've also seen it mess up Bennings, but we're still a little in the dark about the full extent of what this being can do. This is less misdirection as it is the whole Gish Gallop. It's giving us so many things to focus on, and the horror can come from anywhere at this point. So we have no idea how to hone in on what's coming at us. And here's the thing, we might be expecting something to happen with Norris. We sure as hell aren't expecting this. Not a single person is expecting his chest to open up into a massive mouth and chow down on some arms. So even if you're braced, it's still one-upping whatever you think is next.
Clear.
So here it is, our number 1 moment, our scariest scene with a dozen mentions. 12 people had this one down as their most terrifying moment, and it can only be the chestburster scene from Alien. And this one is so much different now than it was when it came out. And again, I think that you can peg this down to that good old misdirection. Keep in mind, when people watched this film when it came out, no one knew what the hell the alien was. Everyone at this point knows what a facehugger does, but the original viewers didn't. They just saw this dude get this thing on his face, and then a little later, it was dead. No one knew what to expect next. So, when he just went about the rest of his day, there was no way to prepare yourself for the terror that was coming. Imagine seeing this scene with no additional information about the alien's life cycle. But then, even if you're aware of the story and what this thing does, the scene is still surprising. It's still that shock when his chest pops open. In that moment, we're all Lambert, recoiling in shock from a bloodburst that no one is expecting. Least of all, Lambert. According to my mom, she took us to see this at a screening, and I was scared for the entire opening, but after this scene, I hid my face and refused to watch a single second more of the movie, and covered my face until she told me the credits were on. So, I guess you could say that this is clearly a scene that traumatized me, and considering its high rankings on this list, did its job on a fair share of you as well. Real quick, I want to point out that our top 3 movies here also had a good competition going for overall scares, because Alien had 16 total points, 12 for that chestburster scene, 2 for Harry Dean Stanton's death scene, 1 for the face hugger jumping out of the egg, and 1 for when Ash's head gets knocked off. But beating Alien for overall is Jaws, which had a total of 19 total votes. 9 for that moment with Chrissy, 5 for Ben's head, and then 3 more for the first time that Jaws pops up out of the water for the first time, and 1 last vote for when the shark interrupts their singing. However, our real winner here with a whopping 23 votes overall, is John Carpenter's The Thing, a film that I'm crowning as having the most scary moments in it. It had 11 for the defib bit, 6 for the blood test, but then 2 for the spiderhead thing, 1 for the ending, 1 more for the bit where Palmer kills Windows, 1 for the autopsy scene, and 1 last one for the dog kennel scene. 23 in total, and our scariest movie here, even though Alien claims that single scariest moment. So there you have 15 of the scariest scenes in movies, not just horror, movies in general. Let's take a quick look at all of the remaining scenes that were voted on that got more than 1 vote. So, was there a scary scene that you love that you didn't see mentioned? I want to hear that down below in the comments. Put that down there. Let me know which one of these traumatized you as a child, and let me know other ones. Yeah, tell me that in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. If you like what you see on this channel, hit that subscribe and the alert notification to get notifications of when new videos come up. Also, check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelinesand and help support this channel. And yeah, just keep on coming back and watching those videos. And I thank you for sticking with me and watching this, and I appreciate everything that you do. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.